Welcome to the podcast where we take a deep dive into the stories behind construction business leaders. We will share how they got started, how they found success, and the lessons learned along the way. I'm your host, Eric Fortenberry. Welcome to Builder Stories. Welcome back, everybody. Today, I am really excited. I have got Casey Fabling, who is the owner of Front Range Home Services located in Denver, Colorado. But I've known Casey for many years now. Casey, I think we first met, it was back in 2021 at Tom Reber's Mile High Profit Summit. I think you were actually living somewhere else at the time, working on a different company. But, it's been awesome just getting to know you, getting to follow along your journey. You've got a very interesting story that I'm excited to finally have you on here and be able to capture. So welcome to Builder Stories.
Awesome. Eric, thank you so much. Dude, it's been great. It's been a wild ride. Yeah, we met way back at the Mile High Profit Summit. I just remember you were telling me the vision of Builder Trend. I was like, dude, when is this going to be ready? Because this is epic.
Job
I'm sorry, shit.
I probably told you the vision of theirs too, though. We might have been comparing and contrasting where we were going.
I was just we were trying not to switch to that. We were using a different product at the same time, and we were constantly driving innovation. And man, it's been so awesome because every time I'm like, hey, does JobTread do this? One of my team members will say, yeah, it does. Here, let me show you how to do it. And you guys are way ahead of anything I'm looking for, which is awesome. So it's been amazing using it.
I appreciate that. And I remember, I think you were showing me, you guys were using Co-Construct at the time. You were at like the top of their leaderboard of some sort. And I was like, man, like I would love to get this guy on, and how are we going to do it? But, anyways, before we get too far ahead of ourselves, why don't you kind of give us a little bit of background, who you are, how'd you get into construction, what led you to start your first business, and ultimately now you've moved to Denver, started another one.
Yeah, man. So I got in construction. A lot of guys I know get in construction when they're in high school, and so I was 14 years old, and I was bored. I was looking for something to do, so I started working for a friend of mine. Did that for a few years, and just all through high school and even into college, I was still doing construction between working for my best friend's dad or just doing my own kind of side jobs, just trying to, pay beer money. And, it was never kind of one of those things I planned to do long term, but I graduated in 2008, could not find a job to save my life. And I was like, well, you guys know how to make money. And, just went to work with my hands, got some good feedback, found out I wasn't bad at this. From that perspective, I've grown a lot and paid stupid tax a lot since then. But yeah, so I've been a 1099 contractor, subcontractor, where I basically ran a company under somebody else's company for a while. I had a partnership for a year, and we've just lots of different growth. And then on my 30th birthday, I started my last company. I was like, I'm just tired of working for other people. I'm ready to start this business, start working for myself. And it was a hell of a ride. We did that for about 8 years. That business unfortunately went under back in 2023, but learned a lot, went through bankruptcy, relocated to Denver, Colorado, and started this business here. And one of the first things we did was sign up with JobTread, and just like, man, it's been awesome.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. So, again, kind of just thinking back about your first business, like, the interesting thing, I feel like a lot of people, end up struggling when they have a lead problem, the top of the funnel, something with sales going on. But I mean, like you had good success in that regard. I mean, you had built out, good sized team, good sized business. Like, Can you kind of give us a little bit more insight into, kind of what happened?
Sure. There's a couple big things that happened in 2022. One of the issues that I was having with Co-Construct was that there was a lot of lack of transparency with some of the numbers. Like it never reported correctly. And like you said, we were their top user in renovations. And so we actually had like one of their lead developers. We had a standing weekly call with them because every week we were like, dude, we need this, we need this, we need this. And so we were constantly developing workarounds. We had, I tell my team all the time, they're like, oh, we could do a spreadsheet. I was like, no, we're not doing spreadsheets. But because like we just had to build so many spreadsheets to work around, what we were using. Unfortunately, in 2022, in June of that year, I found out that there was an issue going on with my it just the numbers weren't making sense. So I started making some phone calls. Found out that my project managers had figured out that if they over awarded jobs to subs, they could get kickbacks, and so
Mm.
that was happening across the board. So I cleared out my whole project management team, cleared out the director of operations, and I mean this time we were 2022 we were targeting around we were expecting to hit around 10 million. So we
Wow.
had a big team, 40 plus people at this time, and we constantly I was trying to build out the back end to try and create some transparency, and that cost me millions. I mean that was a uh, pretty big issue. And I'll just leave it at that. At the end of 22, rates spiked and like my entire pipeline just dissolved. I had kind of pigeonholed myself into doing reno refi type, or HELOC type, improvements. Um, and I didn't have any other like alternate ways of getting jobs. So we were scrambling and we didn't hold on long enough. I ran out of cash and had to shut it down. But yeah, so that was again, there was I was spending so much time working on the development of the systems to make the systems work for what we needed. It just that I didn't focus on some of the development that I need to and some of the growth and oh my God, what if this happened? What are we doing to plan for that?
Yeah, man, that's a hard story to hear. It's so unfortunate when, at the end of the day, it's like, a couple bad actors they can really, put you on your knees and
Right.
ultimately cause you to go under. I mean, like, again, I think it's interesting that a lot of people think that, that the thing that could, kill them is just, again, no lead flow, no top of the funnel, no sales, like, sort of things dry up. But like, there's also a whole nother set of challenges when you do actually have that success and you start building and you start scaling and like you actually get into the millions and, I mean, approaching 10 million. I mean, that's not a small business there, but
No,
like,
it was big.
when you don't have, a great system, great control over your numbers, over kind of managing all of that, that
Right.
cash, it can be challenging when, a bunch of people around kind of see all of that, they see that flowing. And then, again, it's just so unfortunate. I don't know if I've ever shared this story with you, but like when I first started getting into this, I was helping my outdoor living contractor kind of get her business, in a little bit better place. Like she was just like, man, like I keep selling more, I'm doing more, I'm doing all the things I should be doing, but I'm not, seeing any more money on the bottom line. She's like, I don't know where it's going or what's happening. And again, she lacks systems, processes. I helped her kind of get another construction software going. And at the end of the day, like what we found by starting to do the job costing was like her own crews were also robbing her. They would go to Home Depot, they would buy, overbuy the material, and
Yep.
then they go do the job, and then they take all the excess back to a different store, take a store credit. And then we also found one of the crews was literally selling her own inventory out of her own warehouse on the
Yeah.
weekends. And
Yep.
it's just like, man, like that just sucks to hear that, right? Like, somebody, a small business, owner just working their tail off to then just like literally being, getting robbed by the people she's feeding, you know?
Yeah. And it's the frustrating thing too is like that's not an uncommon story. Shit like
Yeah.
that happens in this industry a lot. And part of it is, there's multiple sides of it. Part of it is, there's an aspect of how I choose to lead my life and how I choose, my core values and my morals. To some degree, I'm like, well, no one else would do that. I grew up in a rural community where a handshake meant something, and your word meant something, and we there was a standard that people lived by, and that doesn't translate.
Yeah.
That's not the way to grow a business. The other side is a lot of people, myself included, learning in the trades, we learn how to do work. We don't learn how to grow a business. We don't learn how to protect ourselves. We don't learn how to do,
Yeah.
all the things that it's why for me, I just love having y'all as a partner. And I think of y'all as, it's not just like, oh, this is system we use. No, y'all are a partner to our growth because of there's so many things that you and your team do to set me up for success, to help me think ahead. And it's, this system that I know you've got clients who have, huge jobs that run on job tread, and I can also run, the $10,000 jobs, the $250 jobs, any kind of job that any scale that run, it's the same level of standard, the same
Yeah.
systems and processes. Now, whether and one of the things that my clients love about it is they have that same level of access. I've
Yeah.
got a pretty big project that the clients are in Wyoming right now. And so every day we post those job logs, and every day they get the videos and the footage, and they're like, man, this is awesome. So they're coming into town this week for the first time in like 2 or 3 weeks. They already know what to expect. They already know what's going on. They already know and it didn't require a bunch of extra work from me to hold that up. And it's, I'm using that as the communication as an example that the finances as well. Like they just update when you build the
Yeah.
systems out, when you follow the processes you all put in place, it just works and it's
Yeah.
awesome.
You know, I think that, I like to tell people, I mean, we're not just a software, we're not just a
Right.
software company. Like, we're also trying to provide those services. Like, I believe
Right.
you've got to have the right tools, the right training, the right education. Like, there's so much more to being able to successfully implement a system and really bigger picture to successfully build a business. Like,
Right.
you can't just expect that, one software is going to come in here and do it all for you. It's all about, implementing it. It's about creating those SOPs. It's about, managing, the jobs in the right way and keeping tabs on everything and keeping track. And, don't kind of let things get to the very end of a job and say, oh, wait, we didn't collect any, any payments, like we
Right.
need to kind of like do this as we're going. And, again, I hear the same story though that you've shared, more than I would like, but it is that challenge of people coming out of the trades, off the tools, getting into this business, one way or another, but like not necessarily knowing what you don't know,
Right.
and not knowing, about, the importance of managing your cash flow and making sure that you're hiring the right people and that you've got the right, double checks and systems and processes and, having a good solid bookkeeper. I mean, I probably hear more often than anything, the bookkeeper's the one just slipping money right out the back door. And it's like, man,
Right.
like, it's so, it just sucks to hear that, right? Like you never want to hear like, that's the reason that, someone stole from you is the reason that, you didn't get to grow or didn't get to hit those goals or, didn't get to keep the business.
Right.
What
Yeah, it wasn't that the experience that experience of watching that, was that the germ, the spark that said, "Hey, I think I can do this better?"
for
For
the
you,
outdoor living
yeah.
contractor?
Yeah,
Yeah,
because it
that was definitely part of it.
right.
Again, I ended up going. I had a buddy of mine who's running a construction company at that time asked me to come over and help him, get his business going, and they were struggling to scale.
Mhm.
Again, sort of like it wasn't necessarily like that we were getting, robbed or had that same situation happen, but like as you take on more and more jobs, and as you take on larger jobs, it becomes a lot harder to keep up with all of that. And so, like again, like they were using a bunch of spreadsheets, timesheets, literally walking in the door, going into these folders, putting them on the wall, waiting for the project manager to come review everything, sign off on it. It like every bill got entered into this spreadsheet and then copied to this one, and then someone manually entered it. Like just so many opportunities for
Right.
mistakes to happen that like that doesn't scale.
Right.
Maybe you can make it work for one job, maybe two jobs, but man, like when you really start to get into the larger size jobs or you start to get into a higher volume, it becomes very difficult to keep up with everything. And, certainly if you're trying to do it in your head, or even trying to pass around spreadsheets and things like, as you build your team, it becomes a lot harder, to keep everybody on the same page and making sure that everything is flowing through how it should. And I think a lot of people, again, like the whole notion of being able to use, purchase orders and work orders and compare the PO to the bill. Like, is that what we
Right.
expected to pay? If
Right.
not, well, then let's dig in. If it matches, cool. Like, let's not that be a,
Right,
not
that
let that
doesn't have to be
bottleneck.
a meeting.
Yeah.
That doesn't and that's one of the things that once I started implementing actual systems and processes, and this was before, um, my project managers were going from spending about 20 to 30 hours a week in the office, just white knuckling everything through to we and that, obviously, unfortunately, it took that awakening of like, wow, I've got way too much responsibility in these people's hands. I've got way too much stuff that's hidden from me and from the company that we had to change things around to they went from, like I said, 20, 30 hours down to 4
Hmm.
because so many things were automated that we didn't have to hold on to everything. We didn't have to approve everything. We didn't have to. So the system would update the schedule. The system would update the client. The system would verify, hey, this is on order or whatever. And so again, you guys have taken a lot of those. Y'all have dug so deeply into some of the pain points and some of the you know I just learned this word recently. Like a trigger is like a thing that like pings you and you're like, oh shit, that kind
Yep.
of plinks you. A glimmer is when it's something that like, oh, that's really cool. Like so it's all these little things as I play around with. Is like, oh, there's another glimmer. It's just like, okay, I don't have to solve that problem.
Yeah.
Look at what Eric and his team have done. It's awesome. So and that, I mean, going back to the idea of scaling, a lot of where I see a lot of construction companies, a lot of peers, a lot of people I've talked with where they can't grow, they can't move past is like, well, I'm the only one who can do this.
Yeah.
I have to hold on to this. And of course, we've learned, unfortunately, we've learned this the hard way of like, well, you can't trust anybody, blah, 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 whatever. When, when I've got a system when, job trade, y'all are thinking ahead of me, y'all are getting way ahead of what I need to where it's like, okay, I can scale, I can train, I can grow. I mean, shit, I can hire somebody and say, do all the project management training and job tread, and then we'll talk. Just like that's your first day is just
Yeah.
go through this process, learn the system, learn how this system does it. I know you know how to put 2x4s together and paint a wall, but like, let's figure out how to do this well so that we can produce great work and it be a great experience.
I think going through, what you went through, like you truly understand like why it is so important that everyone on the team,
Right.
from the project managers, the supers, the field guys, like to really use the system.
Yeah.
Like there's so much more benefit and it's so much more important than just like, tracking that one person's hours or that one person's progress. It gives you as the owner, the leader, the business to be able to see the progress kind of at that higher level to know, where jobs are tracking and where they're
Right.
not tracking, and again, it's like, I think a lot of times, and again, when I first built this out, like, we got that natural resistance, to change, like the people, the crews, they didn't want to do it. They didn't want to take their photos. They didn't want to clock in, like, but at the end of the day, like, it's so important that like you take the time to help them understand that like, this is how we're going to be able to successfully grow and scale our business.
Right.
It's in no one's best interest for you to not be able to to sell more jobs, to profitably manage those jobs, to keep the business going, because like then like again, you're feeding them, you're giving them the work, and so
Well,
like they need to work with the with
right.
your companies to be able to implement that successfully.
And one thing I've learned too is, the saying, the canary in the coal mine. The coal miners would have a little canary sitting in a cage, and when the canary fell over, that was the early indicator of like, you've got the gas that's going to kill the miners. Get the hell out of here. Um, it's that little litmus test of, can you upload photos to the job log? Can you receive a bid request and approve it or give feedback or whatever. This is the litmus test we're giving to our subs now, to where, my best sub over the summer, we started saying, hey, we can't, because what they were doing was they were texting photos to the assistant project manager, and she was like putting everything in the system. And it's like, no, we're not doing this anymore. We're not doing, admin work anymore. They can upload it, give them, and they didn't want to do that. Well, that was a good indicator to look deeper into what else is not happening. Where else are my expectations not being met? And so, anytime there's pushback of like, no, we can just, it's fine, I'll just let them. No, because we want to have a standard of what does it look like for a job to run really well? What does it look like for me, you, all of us to come in to work and to be able to trust each other? And, it's kind of like, standing on bases playing baseball. It's like, if I can, I'm firing a throw to first, because the first baseman should be standing on there catching, ready to catch it. I'm not thinking, oh, are they standing over there? Should I throw it? Should I not? No, I'm trying to wing it over there. And when we
Yep.
don't make those passes, that's a great indicator to say, hey, we've got bigger problems, we've got bigger issues. And so the cool thing is it's bringing the solutions down to smaller problems and
Yep.
really fast feedback loops so we can train better and we can lead better, so we can do better projects. Like you
Yeah.
said, the bigger projects, the scaled projects, my $100,000 project requires, I mean, it's longer, but it requires about the same amount of effort as the $10,000 project,
Yeah.
but I want more of those,
Yeah.
and
So
because those are the type of projects that I can build the team and build the freedom to be able to do the things that I want to do with my family, right?
yeah. When I think about, what you went through and again, like I saw, I mean, you took, an emotional, physical, just like just the toll that that had on you
Yeah.
personally, on your family, everyone that was involved. I mean, like honestly, like Casey, I was so surprised when I heard that, like, you basically moved, you restarted, and you went at it again. Like, I mean, like that is like the definition of resilience if I've ever seen it. Like, so many people would get knocked down so hard that they never get back up again and they
Right.
never try again. Like, what was it that led you to again, like, get back on the horse, start a new construction business, like, and what would you say, you immediately did different, from day one with this new business?
It's yeah, I look and I it's a great question. Looking back, I don't know if I had when I started the last business, I had clarity on what I wanted. Right? I was like, okay, this is what I want. This is why I'm starting the business, and I was excited and I was going. This time I need to pay bills, and I was like, I'm looking at myself. I was 38 at the time. I was like, I don't know anything else. And I had been applying to jobs, and it's like every time I submit a job application, I was like, there goes a piece of my soul. It's just I c- I can't imagine someone saying, well, you were supposed to be here at 8, but you got here at 8:05. It's like I'm used to, okay, Home Depot opens at 6. I got to
Yeah.
be there at 6, so that I can be ready for the job site at 7:30. Um, I just it's just a different way my brain processes, right?
Once an entrepreneur, always an entrepreneur.
Yeah, you're broken at that point,
Yeah.
So it was part of it was like I just don't know what other skill I have. I was doing some roofing for a little bit. I was selling some roofs, and that gave me a little, that kind of kept the cash flow going a bit. But again, it wasn't something that I knew I wanted long term. Selling roofing is a lot of nights and weekends, and I have 4 kids. My goal of life is not to work. My goal of life is to make great memories with my family.
Yeah.
And so, just having that drive that was in me to say, this is what I want for myself and my family. I, I said, well, I guess we'll go do this again. I guess I'll give it another shot. Um, and the hardest thing has been relearning a lot of lessons I've completely forgotten. Some of this phase I haven't been in years, but it has been. I saw you. That conversation that you and I had that you just referred to was in 2023 at the Mile High event, and you were like, "Whoa, Casey, I heard this was going on. How are you doing?" And I was like, "Well, trying to figure it out." But it was Steve Rosenberg, who good friends of both of ours. I saw him again at that event. He had gone through a really tragic loss earlier that year, and he was one of those guys who just kept texting me and be like, "Hey, how are you doing? Just checking on you." Tom Reber, another good friend of both of ours, I reached out to him shortly after it happened. I said, "Hey, I need help. I need to know someone who went through this," and he connected me with a guy um, that was, I mean, he was my lifeline for a while.
Yeah.
And, it was reaching out to my resources saying, hey, I need help getting through this because I can't see past the next 10 minutes. Um, and, but getting on job site, getting tools in my hand was cathartic. It felt good. It felt like, okay, I know how to do this.
Yeah.
Especially feeling like, I've just been, just taking such a big loss. It's like, okay, I need some short wins. And so I started
Yeah.
focusing on short wins. What can I do today?
Yeah. So, and would you, you know, when you think about kind of like who, again, kind of early days of Front
Yeah.
Range, like, it seems like you sort of said, all right, I want to kind of be more methodical. Let's take it, one step at a time. I mean, obviously, you were selling huge projects, so it
Yeah.
seems like you kind of reined it back down.
Way
You
back
kept
down.
it a much smaller operation. You
Right.
know, put on all the hats again, back to the basics, gonna go sell, kind of the home services,
Yep.
smaller type jobs. I mean, and so how has that, evolved for you?
So there's a couple things I did right away that I knew I'm not great at admin. I mean, we all know that. So I mean, admin is like most contractors like, oh my god, I got to do this. I used to be that guy with literally the shoebox full of receipts in the back of my truck that I would go through when it was so full I couldn't put the lid back on it, and I hated myself for a couple of days after that. But then I went right back to the shoebox. So one of the things I did right away, almost even before I could afford it, was I hired a virtual assistant to help me manage the office. And I went through uh, uh, VPM, Virtual Property Manager Solutions, which they're awesome. Pete is amazing. Him and his whole team. They set me up with somebody that I've hired virtual assistants before. And it's interesting because I had a list. I went through and I was like, okay, these are my top three. And Connor was like, nope, nope. And I understand why you like this person, but let me show you this other person. And, in their expertise, they brought the person who's my office manager direct, she's my executive assistant. She's been with me since, I think she's been with me for a year and a half, something like that. Just, she makes my life so much easier. And so that was one of the things that I did right away that helped me get out of the mess, so that, I hired her, and her first job was to go through all of job tread training and just learn the system. She's like, I don't know if I'll need to use this. I was like, believe me, you will. Just go through it, figure it out. The second thing I did was I realized that, I mean, I didn't know anybody here. I had some family here, but I really didn't have any connections. And so I realized that one thing that I did really well before was I helped realtors, and get through the process of helping them buy or sell homes with their clients. I understood what they needed. I understood what their pain points were. And I knew how to show up well in that area. And so I started reaching out and asking my friends for referrals, and just, anything I could do to get in front of those. And so, bringing on virtual assistants, I hired marketing and project management shortly after I hired an LV. And then just every realtor, I just over delivered. And there were a lot of jobs I didn't make money. I lost money. I just wanted to make sure that everybody involved had the best experience I could possibly deliver, because that's what got the next 2, 3, 4 referrals.
Yeah.
And so, that was my mindset of just like, okay, I'm going to take this skill set I have, and I'm going to just show up the best I can with this. And, truck breaks down. I woke up one morning, all my tools had gotten stolen. Show up on job sites and the subs had trashed the job, all the normal problems that we all deal with in construction. I just kept showing up to say, okay, well, I'm going to learn. This is going to take me to the next level. And I just kept showing up.
Yeah. I mean, so when you say you hired, VA, and then you hired
Yeah.
marketing, project management, assume the marketing, was that like a marketing agency or someone like a
No.
partner? Or did you bring a full-time?
So I went on to VPM and hired a marketing person. And
Okay.
and part of this is I have worked with a lot of marketing agencies before. I knew that I was working to develop my voice and my brand again. I also knew I couldn't afford a marketing agency. So, it was working through kind of that process of just putting out content, just feeding the machine, right? We've been pretty steadily feeding the machine for about 18 months now. And just now the phone's really starting to ring. Just now we're starting to get kind of that brand recognition awareness a little bit, to where it's like, where'd that lead come from? Whoa, where'd that lead come? They weren't from my direct referrals. They weren't from, I didn't know that it was somebody said, or they were like, I don't know, I've just kind of seen your stuff for a while. And so, I just knew that's such a long-term play. I had to get going as fast as possible, even
Yeah.
if we were doing it poorly, which, I was at the beginning. I'd forgotten what to do. I haven't been running marketing in a while. So it's just putting content out there. And the funny thing is, like, we went through about a year of really trying to clean up our marketing. The thing that's working right now is I grab my phone and I record and I just do job walkthroughs. That's what's working right now.
Nice.
That is getting more feedback and more, "Hey, I saw this, what you're doing. I just saw what you're doing in Castle Rock. I just saw what you're doing in Louisville. I've been watching you for the last couple weeks. This is so cool. I want you to do this at my house." That's been the thing that's been working. I just did it one day. Another contractor friend of mine, Dylan, was telling me about his experience doing it. I was like, "Well, I'll try it."
Where are you posting? What platforms?
All of them.
All of them.
Yeah. Yeah, we just blast it. So,
Nice.
but Instagram's our main one.
So project management VA, how does that work?
So I hired Gwen had, I think, 5 years experience working with uh, property management companies and tenant turns, things like that. And so she had some experience, virtually helping manage process. And the other thing I really loved about her resume and what she jumped out was she had taught English for a while, virtually, and she shared some of the aspects of her where she could, she explained processes really well. I kind of asked her some questions in the interview, and, like, we'll be dealing with something. I'll be like, "Hey, Gwen, that needs to go in the SOP." And she just does it. I mean, her SOP, I think, is 100 pages right now. And it's a reference guide with links to job tread trainings, with links to when we're onboarding a new client, this is how we do it. And it's, she builds all the cool little graphics that make it so easy so that as we've, as our team has grown, it's like, "Hey, here's your reference," where it's not me sitting next to them or Gwen or an Elvie or anybody sitting next to anybody saying, "Hey, this is how we do it." It's like, no, this is the reference right here.
You know, I think it's such a good move that again, like when you had limited capital, you're back at square one.
Mm-hmm.
You knew though that you needed to invest in some resources.
Right.
You chose to turn to the virtual assistants who gave you that, again, that office admin, that EA, executive assistant, horsepower. You had some marketing, going. You got some project management going, helping you develop out the things that, again, are very time consuming, very tedious. And that freed up your time to go focus on the networking and the sales and estimating, getting the jobs
Right.
coming in the door. I think that was a great move. I'm curious, like, how, I gotta believe, like, and correct me if I'm wrong, but like after getting burned so hard, like, how have you been able to learn to trust again and to
Sure.
delegate and again, like these, VAs are obviously who knows where they are. They're
Sure.
not right here, right sitting next to you where you can watch, every
Right.
single thing they do. Like, I gotta believe like that had to have been hard for you to overcome this notion of trusting others again. How have you worked through that?
There's two aspects of that. First, it was, yes, it was. And honestly though, I had already done the work. It was way harder to trust myself
Hmm.
because of what I went through and because of the damage that I caused, because, and I have to take extreme ownership of it because it doesn't help for me to be like, "Oh, well, you know, it could have been this, it could have been," it was my company. I was running it and it failed under my leadership. And the pain I caused my kids, my wife, my family, that I had to take full responsibility for.
Yeah.
And so going forward, I had to do the work to say, I have to trust myself. And it was almost easier, honestly, to hire someone, in Mexico or the Philippines and be like, "All right, here's the client list. Here's what we're doing," and kind of bring them on board. I also have learned to have a process of bringing trust. So kind of like I said about that early litmus test of like, "Hey, go through the trainings and watch them." It's not like sit and watch them do it. I'm just like, "I'll check in with you later." And how'd it go? Yep, I went through it. Certificates in my email. Cool. Okay. Next step. Um, and this is what I recommend for anybody is, next step, give them access to my email, which you can either give them full access or you can give them admin access, and clean it up. Cause I had hundreds of emails. One of my favorite things in the world is, and like every day I look at my phone in the morning, it's like, "Oh, that's a lot of emails." And An hour later, there's 3 in there because an LV has already gone through and cleaned them up and made sure that those are the only 3 that I need to look at and respond to, because she's either taken it and responded to it for me, or she's gotten rid of it or whatever. And that was a magical moment after about 3 months when I was like, oh man, I need to find this email. I was supposed to respond to this guy and I'm manically searching and I found the email. Oh my God, she archived it. Oh wait, she actually responded to it. Oh, that's exactly how I would have responded. Oh, and she already communicated with the sub. And oh, this is already done. Let me get out of your way here for a minute, and it was so awesome. Like that's a magical moment when you're like, hey, this is beyond me again. Um,
Yeah.
and so, you know, building that building that trust with the individuals, it's been great having these people on my team, because there have even been people that I gave more responsibilities to. I've given subs to, where the office, where an LV comes to me and says, hey, Casey, I really think they're taking advantage of you here, here, and here. Because
Hmm.
of the transparency of job tread, she can look at it and say specifically, this is where I'm seeing this happen
Hmm.
from Mexico. And
Yeah.
like, I was on the job site at 2 o'clock and I didn't see that shit. And she's like, yeah, well, this is what I'm seeing from where I'm at. And so it's building that team. I've got to trust somebody,
Yeah.
and so it's
Absolutely.
it's incremental. But but that's the process I've used to kind of let that go.
Yeah. And so you've got your VAs.
Yeah.
Is there anyone else like on staff right now, or is it just you kind of sole employee?
Yeah, no, I've got one other guy, and this was a big shift. Again, I mentioned Steve Rosenberg a little while ago. I went to one of his events where last time you and I saw each other in Houston, and one of the big takeaways was he said, "Hey, do a time study," which I've done a time study. I was like, I know what I'm doing. I don't need to do this shit. No, okay, fine, I'll do it. Whatever. So for 2 weeks, every 15 minutes, I marked down how I use my time. I was spending 3 to 4 hours a day driving,
Hmm.
and with my phone in my hand, trying to respond to shit, trying to call people, trying to figure stuff out, trying to go. And then I come home and I'd wolf down dinner, and then I'd try to be present for bedtime, and then I'd go work for a couple hours or all night or whatever. And I was never catching up. So I hired a guy just to drive me around,
Hmm.
and it's been awesome because I don't have a project manager on site right now. I am the project manager. I'm also doing all the sales, and I also will do sometimes small projects that I have a hard time, that are like the relationship building projects, but it's
Yeah.
hard for me to find a sub to do them. So Breno drives me. He shows up at my house every morning, and we roll. Like it's awesome.
That's that sounds really awesome. Some people kind of laugh, but I mean, pretty much like when my wife and I family are together, like she is always driving.
Oh
She
yeah,
knows that it's better for me not to be behind the wheel because I may get distracted by my phone. But like
yeah,
we're about to drive down to Corpus, and it gives me a good solid 7 hours on my on my computer
right,
just riding along, and I can get so much done. Like
yeah,
that's driver's one of my dream dream services there that I'd love
dude,
to
it's
have.
epic. I remember Gary Vee talking about it when Uber was becoming a big thing, and people were talking about how expensive it was. He's like, I love Uber because I don't have to think about it. And he just, and I just remembered that kind of stuck in my head. I've pulled people onto my team to drive for me before, as I was scaling before, but this is the first time I've hired a designated, like, hey, you're a driver. Um, and you know, it's like, he'll bring me a jacket when it's cold outside. It's like, hey, we're heading back out, and he'll be like, here's your jacket. And it's like, oh, this is actually kind of cool, but, and he has construction experience. So when I'm hands on tools, he's right there with me. So
That's awesome.
it is awesome.
Yeah, it's the windshield hours. I mean, that time can just, it really does take up so
Yeah.
much of your day. And when, I love though you're not sacrificing getting out there and being present, being on the job site, meeting with the clients, like, like you're still able to do that, but you're also productive
Right.
while you're en route. I mean, that's the first time I've heard this. I love it, Casey. That's
Well,
that's awesome.
he sits so close to me. A lot of my guys, a lot of the crews, I found a great Brazilian community, and Breno is from Brazil as well. So I'll get a text or a call, and I'll be like, "Hey, call Marcos," and he'll put him on FaceTime, and we'll just talk to Marcos. He's translating, and we're just three-way translating, or I'll be standing in front of a client, and my phone rings, or I get a text, and I just hand it to Breno, and I say, "Hey, call." go handle this. And because he's so close to me,
Yeah.
I've been starting to delegate some of those responsibilities to him. Um, it's again, I recommend so many people and they're like, well, I don't know. I don't know what he would do. It's the same feedback I get when I tell people to get executive assistants. Like, well, I don't know what they would do. Literally anything. Like I'm coming to Job Trade Connect in a few weeks, and LV booked my hotel. She booked my flight. I am literally the guy who has booked hotels and flights the wrong day, the wrong city, all that, and I've got to take forever to figure it out. She's very detailed. She's very accurate. She makes sure it gets done. I just don't even have to think about it.
Yeah. So what do when you think about your time now, like
Yeah,
how do you how would you kind of divide up how much time you're spending on estimating versus, doing the work on the job site, project management, like,
sure.
kind of what's that mix look like?
I'm about. I'm still about a day to 2 days hands on tools. So I mean, I still spend about let's say 10 to 16 hours a week with tools in my hands. And then I'm spending the other bulk of my time. I would say it's about thirds. So,
Yeah.
because estimating, and this is another thing. Again, this is one of my favorite. It's the thing I show off about JobTread is we get the client's info, and I'm like, you know what? Hey, if they're like, hey, come look at my job. And I started doing this back in 2017. I started working with Tom Reber, and he taught me how to do this, and I haven't looked back since. But I'm like, hey, can you send me some photos? Let's have a conversation. I don't want to just come out there and look at the job. This is what I've learned has really helped me. And so we have a little process that we coach clients to send me the photos or videos, and then I have a phone call with them, and I talk them through the project. And then the next thing we get their info, and they get a welcome email through JobTread. And I say, you're just going to get an email from our project management software. I Maybe 10 people in the last year have been like, oh, what is this? I can't use JobTread, blah, blah, blah. Everybody else is like, this is amazing, because we show them we have a process. And our welcome letter says, this is what it is. This is how you log in. This is what to expect. And it's just this really nice setup. And again, we do this for the $100,000 projects. We do this for the $180 gate repairs. They still get this process. And so it's like walking into the Ritz or the Four Seasons, be like, how are you, sir? How are you doing today? Can I get you a water? It's like kind of giving that experience
Yeah.
of excellence. Because construction is messy as shit. Like, we walk into people's homes and tear their homes apart and put them back together carefully.
Yeah.
And it's so making sure that our communication and our process and our, that there's a standard there that's reproducible and consistent, then clients have a higher expectation, which gives us the opportunity to deliver to that higher expectation.
Sure.
So it's been pretty awesome.
How do kind of what's your plan for the next, couple of years? I mean, do you see yourself eventually trying to kind of, hire,
Sure.
people to kind of take yourself out of the day to day, out of the, certainly getting off the tools, getting off the job site, maybe focusing on the sales more, eventually kind of taking a step back. Like how in your mind, what's kind of the next, 3, 4, 5 years look like? I mean, do you want to stay hands on, stay kind of exactly where you're at? Do you want to build out a team again? Like kind of
Yeah,
what's the plan?
it's a great question, and it's something that I actually had a call with a friend of mine earlier today to talk about that, because I want to make sure. I think previously some of my growth was driven by ego of like, I want to hit that $10 million mark. I want to hit this. I want to have, I have 70 employees, blah, 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 whatever. There was something that was driving to say, this is what I want, um, what I want now is I want freedom to be able to take my kids camping. This past weekend, we're recording right now. We're coming into Christmas. I've been running manic for like the last 2 months. I've
Mm.
worked weekends. And I've been present with family, but it's been kind of, it's not been in balance. I've been leaning way more toward work than family. Um, and so this weekend I had nothing on the schedule. Well, my 15-year-old, he's almost 15, sits me down on Monday and he said, hey, I'm looking at the weather. It looks pretty nice out there. I was like, yeah, it sure does. He said, I want to go camping with you. Okay. let's go camping, dude. If you want to go camping, I'll take you camping. So
Awesome.
we went high altitude up in the mountains, and being able to make that memory, like, who I will never remember what job was running this weekend. I will never remember, he will never remember what he should have been studying for finals. He will remember that hiking trip, especially
Yeah.
because my stove freaking blew up. So we had to figure it out. It was cold as shit. But like I want to make those memories with my family. I do enjoy construction. I love construction. I love building a team. Do I want to build it like I did before? No. So finding that balance, I know a lot of guys who love hands-on tools and that's all they ever want to do. And so
Sure.
for me, it's finding that balance of what does it look like to lead a team, to build the company that gives me what I want in my family. And I get way more excited about knowing that because of what I'm doing, we're building good work, and all these people around me, the lives that they're having, the opportunities that they're having, the memories they're making with their families because they work with me. I get really excited about that. So
That's awesome, man. Again, I do think, especially, your first business, like everyone kind of just, they see that shiny, number, whatever that number is that you have in your head, and then you hit it, and the goalpost moves, and you just, it seems like a lot of times it's very financially driven,
yeah,
and again, I think just because of your experience, having gone through what you did and literally losing it all, I mean, the same similar thing, but different. Like for me, I mean, again, I built and sold a company. You can have all the money in the world, and at the end of the day, though, you're still not like satisfied. You're not happy. Like,
right.
you have to learn that there's so much more to life than money.
Mm,
Whether you have more than you need or whether you have not enough, like you have to be able to find, you know, that balance between like, this is my life, this is my journey. I have a family. Like these are the things that make me happy. I've got a company. This is what I need to do here. But like, again, I do sometimes feel like people figure it out on that second company,
yeah,
like what is the right balance? And it's not just about this, that this magical number that just keeps changing and growing. And it's about, how do you love what you do every day? Feel like you're making a big impact on the world around you. You're adding value to people's lives. You're helping them. You're helping, put food on the plate for the people that are working for you, but you're also devoting your time and your love and your focus on your family and helping them develop. I mean, your kids are your, they are your legacy, right? Like they will
right.
grow up and they will be, the thing that you'll be the most proud of at the end of the day. They will be the only thing that will be by your side. All your possessions, all of that. Like, again, you're going to leave
Nothing
all of
else
that here
matters.
one day, you
Right,
know?
right. The homeowner that I put my blood, sweat, and tears into literally can't remember my name in 6 months, and that's okay. That's just the way it is.
Yeah.
And so it's like this. I need to. It was such a big wake up call to make sure that, hey, this time around I'm going to really focus on what are the things that are most valuable to me, and don't don't let that budge.
Yeah. I think having a plan for controlled growth,
Right.
being very, methodical, strategic about, how do I want the growth to look? How do I want the team? Because, again, I think a lot of people, they grow too fast.
Yeah.
They overhire, they take on more projects than they should. And again, it's this ego that drives this desire to just like, max out everything. And a lot of times like that isn't the right answer. That's how mistakes happen. That's how, just things start to go wrong when you don't do it in a controlled manner. And, at the end of the day, like, I think it's important that people understand, like, there's this balance of like doing it the right way, maintaining control, maintaining quality. You can't sacrifice, just the customer's experience. You can't sacrifice your quality because like all of these things, one slip in any of that could affect, your reputation. It can affect your company and your brand. And, I think it's important that we think more in the long-term game
Right.
about what is best for us over the, the years instead of what's best for us this month or next month, this paycheck, next paycheck, and so again, I feel like you've really, kind of got that sort of that much more holistic picture of what's important, to Casey and to you and both personally and professionally. So
Yeah.
I think that's, it's just neat that, again, you've unfortunately had to learn it the hard way. I hope that others, listening to your story are able to kind of take some of these lessons to heart, because like, again, there is more than just building the biggest business that you possibly can.
Right. Yeah. And it's the sting, the crushing pain of it is gone. And a lot of there's still things that we're working through and trying to, there's still things that linger, right? It doesn't
Yeah.
just go away. These are things that, bankruptcy and closing a business, and it's way easier to start a business than it is to close it, especially when it's, not on purpose or not planned exit.
Yeah.
Um, but as the pain recedes, the lessons come. And, you know, I've heard so many people say, I'm not glad I went through that, but I've learned a lot through it. And I'm grateful for what I have now because of the lesson. And so,
Yeah.
and that's the difference between resilience and growth and versus just getting getting your head beat in and losing. Cause
Yeah.
if you don't learn the lesson, then then I just quit,
Yeah.
So, but
And you can't keep making the same mistakes over and over
no,
either.
no,
Yeah.
yeah, you want different presents and different
Yeah.
packaging, but I will say that the more I focused on what I'd want, like you said, the more I found the right partners, the more I found, like, even just like seeing you, a couple months ago and just connecting again and talking to Alex and just like, this is the more it's like I find people that have the same core values, the same purpose, the same, we can cut to the shit about, we're not going to talk about the game. We're going to talk about, hey, what's life? What's real? What's meaningful? And we're going to get through
Yeah.
it, and we're all, I know you're building a life that you want for you and your team and your family. And like, I resonate that and I respect that. And again, I'm so grateful for what you and your team have done, man. You've made a huge difference in my life. So thank you.
Oh yeah, man. Absolutely. And again, it means a lot to know that we are making an impact, right? Just
100%.
just like you make an impact on your clients. I mean, that's absolutely the number one thing that drives me the most at this point, is knowing that I'm making the biggest impact on others. And
Yep.
and I think one thing I've always noticed about you, though, is that you have continued, to really keep the right people, around you, at all times. I mean, from Tom Reber, from Steve Rosenberg, to, Pete, to all of these people who have
Yeah.
made, a huge impact on you. I mean, I'm curious if you can kind of just shed a little light on, I mean, just the notion of, these coaches and how they've helped you, to continually sort of, personally and professionally develop yourself and your own skills.
Yeah. I remember the first time I hired Tom, I didn't even tell my wife about it. And I don't remember how much it cost. It was more than I could afford for sure. And, and I learned within 2 weeks, I was working consistently 60-hour weeks. Within 2 weeks, I cut that down to 40
Hmm.
because of what I learned working with him. It's the things, even just this recent round of, connecting with Steve and working with him and him like, yeah, hey, make sure you do your time study. Really, dude, I've done like, I've done a bunch of time studies. Well, do it again. I learned so much. And it wasn't the
Yeah.
things that I was expecting to find. It wasn't the things. And it's interesting too, because it freed me up to do. It's kind of like, oh, find out what you're doing and you're going to be able to do more what you want to do. I actually have more time to do the things I don't want to do, but they're the highest impact things in my company that I need to do to take me to that next level and take me to that next goal. And, and it's that, Steve used to have a saying, they say a lot of like, it's that 3 feet of perspective, 3 feet away from me. He can see it better than I can see it right in the middle of it.
Yeah.
And so it's, I'm a huge proponent of coaches. I constantly recommend, and, you know, I know you have coaches, we can go figure it out. We can go build the thing, in construction. We've all learned how to build a deck or a bathroom because we tore the damn thing apart and we're like, shit, how does this go back together? Or, the first time you do plumbing and it blows up in your face and you're like, well, I'm not going to do that again. You're going to do it again, but you learn how to do it better and better because you hire a plumber and you're like, oh, that's how you do that. Cool, Nick, you're going to do that. I'm not going to do that plumbing anymore. And it's like, and it's finding well, I can't afford a plumber. Well, you know what I couldn't afford was spending all day cleaning up a mess and fixing the drywall underneath and doing all this. And so that's what a coach does for me, is like brings in that perspective of like, hey, I see what you're doing. And just going back to that conversation I was having with Bob earlier, where he was saying, hey, I see you want to do this with your growth of your company. It kind of feels like I'm hearing that ego thing from before. Like, what do you actually want? What is the actual metric? What is the actual result you're going to get from that growth? Great question. I'm going to have that answer by the time next time I meet him.
No, it's awesome, man. Well, look, it's just been great being able to watch you go through, the ups and the downs and just seeing you continue to get up again.
Yeah.
I think it truly is, the best example of like, look, being an entrepreneur, being a small business owner, being a leader is not easy.
Yeah.
If this was easy, everybody would do it, but like, most people can't do it. And if they even try, they end up quitting within the first year.
Right.
But like I think it's that resilient mindset that you have. It's the determination, it's the feeling that you've got your back against the wall and you've only got one direction to go and you're going to fight your damnedest and you're going to leave everything out on the playing field every single day. Like, I think that truly is like what it is about. And I have no doubt that like whatever you get thrown, like you will continue to rise up and to, overcome and to keep building. And, all at the same time, like you get to enjoy the time with your family and,
Mm-hmm.
and building those relationships while also building a business. Like, to some extent, like, you can have your cake and eat it too, but
Right.
you have to be, really dialed in and understand and appreciate, the value of your time and make
100%.
sure you're spending it on the right things.
And be humble enough to see what the feedback is actually telling me,
Yeah.
and not say this is what I want it to tell me. So
Yeah.
100%.
Well, look, Casey, I really appreciate you coming on. I know that, this it's taken a little while for us to make happen. And I know that, it's taken you, a good while to actually be able to, to talk about these things. And like
Yeah.
you said, the sting is no longer there. Obviously, you still got remnants of this, but like, again, I really appreciate you, and your willingness to share this story, because I think so many other people, they need to hear this and they need to see from somebody who has gone through this and has risen back up, because, again, this would probably crush most people to the point where they would never try again. And I admire you so much, for getting back on the horse and for going at it again. And, again, I'm a big fan of yours, man. Anything I could do to help you, you know that you can call me, text me anytime. I appreciate you, and it's your motivation, to me and my team to see what's possible and the impact we're making. So, thanks for being you, man.
100%. Eric, thank you so much. You've always responded to my calls and my texts like lightning fast. So, dude, I appreciate you. Thank you.
Absolutely. Well, again, have a great one, man. I look forward to seeing, many more years of success. Can't wait to see where you build this thing. And I look forward to seeing you at Job Tread Connect.
Thanks, Eric. Looking forward to it too.
All right. See you, Casey.
Bye.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of Builder Stories. We hope you enjoyed the conversation and gained valuable insights that can help you in your journey along the way. Don't forget to subscribe to the show and leave us a review. And as always, if you or someone you know has a story to share, please contact us at builderstories.com. We'd love to hear from you. I'm Eric Fortenberry, and remember, every builder has a unique story. Keep building yours.